Have you ever heard of a war against birds? Unbelievable as it may sound, there was a time in 1932 when Australia was gripped by what we now call the Emu War. This peculiar event in history was not a figment of someone's wild imagination, but a real-life drama played out in the vast expanses of Western Australia. In the early 20th century, the land down under was experiencing an agricultural boom. Farmers were settling in remote areas, cultivating land and raising livestock. Yet, with progress came conflict. The native wildlife, particularly emus, found their habitats shrinking and food sources dwindling. And so, they turned to the lush farmlands, causing extensive damage and competing for resources with livestock. The farmers were at their wits' end, their pleas for help echoing in the halls of government. What could they do? The emus were not just another pest, they were a formidable adversary in large numbers, and so the stage was set for an unusual war where the opponents were not nations but man and bird. By the 1930s, emus had become a significant problem for farmers in Western Australia. The vast expanse of the Australian outback had always been home to these large, flightless birds. However, as the human population expanded and farming activities increased, the emus found their habitat shrinking. Driven by a severe drought that had made their natural food sources scarce, these emus began to venture into the fertile farmlands. Imagine, if you will, a horde of thousands of these towering birds, each standing up to 6 feet tall and capable of running at speeds of up to 30 miles per hour, descending on your fields. They devoured crops, trampled fences, and wreaked havoc on the farmland. For the farmers, every emu was a feathery foe, a threat to their livelihood. The damage was extensive. In the region of Campion, where wheat farming was a primary source of income, the emus' relentless raids left the farmers desperate and on the brink of ruin. In their despair, the farmers did what anyone in their situation would do. They reached out for help. They petitioned the Australian government, pleading for assistance in controlling the emu population. The farmers' pleas painted a grim picture of their predicament. Their crops were being destroyed, their profits were dwindling, and their families were facing the threat of starvation. The government, understanding the severity of the situation, knew they had to intervene. The livelihoods of many were at stake. The emu problem was no longer just an issue for the farmers, it had become a national concern. With the livelihoods of many at stake, the government decided to step in. They came up with a plan, a military operation, to drive out the emus and protect the farmlands. Little did they know, this decision would lead to one of the most unconventional wars in history, a war against birds, the Emu War. The Australian government's response was to send in the military, led by Major G.P.W. Meredith. Imagine this, a full-fledged military operation not against a foreign power, but against emus, the large, flightless birds native to Australia. It was an unprecedented move, one that would go down in history as the infamous Emu War. Major Meredith, armed with a crew and Lewis guns, was tasked with a mission as unusual as it was challenging, to cull the emu population. As the operation commenced in November of 1932, the emus proved to be a more formidable foe than anyone could have anticipated. Known for their agility and speed, these birds were elusive targets, often scattering before the soldiers could even take aim. The Australian landscape, vast and wild, provided the perfect backdrop for this peculiar war. It was a battleground that the emus knew well, offering them an advantage that the soldiers could not match. The soldiers chased and pursued, but the emus, with their impressive speed, often managed to stay one step ahead. As days turned into weeks, the soldiers found themselves in a frustrating cycle of chase and retreat. Every attempt to control the emu population seemed to backfire. The birds, displaying a remarkable ability to evade capture, outmaneuvered the soldiers time and time again. The military operation, initially seen as the solution to the emu problem, was proving to be ineffective. The soldiers, despite their best efforts, were struggling. The emus were not just surviving the onslaught, they were thriving, their numbers seemingly undiminished. The situation was not without its irony. Here was a military operation, armed and ready for conflict, and yet, they were being outwitted by birds. It was a war, but not one that they were winning. The battleground was littered with failures and missed opportunities, a testament to the unexpected resilience of the emus. Despite their best efforts, the soldiers found themselves outwitted by their feathered adversaries. The Battle of the Emus, as it would come to be known, was far from over, but the early rounds were going decidedly in favor of the birds. The Emu War ended not with a bang but with a whimper. the military operation conceived to control the emu population had been abandoned, deemed ineffective. The soldiers, armed with their Lewis guns, had been outsmarted and outrun by these surprisingly agile birds time and time again. The emus, displaying an impressive tenacity, continued to thrive despite the human efforts to curb their numbers. The inconclusive end of the Emu War was a stark contrast to the confident commencement of the military operation. The emu population, far from being called into submission, had emerged from the conflict largely unscathed. The birds continued to descend upon farmland, disrupting agricultural activities and causing significant damage to crops. The government's attempt to resolve the emu nuisance had ended in a stalemate. The unexpected outcome of the Emu War did not go unnoticed. Domestically, the conflict attracted a fair share of ridicule. The idea of deploying a military operation against birds seemed absurd to many, leading to a wave of mockery and satire. The media had a field day, painting a comical picture of soldiers locked in battle with flightless birds. The Emu War was quickly branded as a farcical escapade, a testament to the government's misguided approach to wildlife management. Internationally, the Emu War also drew attention, albeit of a different kind. The conflict was seen as a prime example of the complexities of human-wildlife conflicts and the challenges of managing wildlife populations. The Emu War served as a stark reminder of the unintended consequences of human actions on the environment, generating discussions around ecological challenges and the role of military intervention in addressing these issues. The so-called Emu War had ended, but the questions it raised were far from over. The conflict, despite its humorous undertones, had exposed the intricacies of human-wildlife interactions and the need for more nuanced approaches to wildlife management. The Emu War, rather than fading into obscurity, continues to resonate in contemporary discussions on environmental conservation and wildlife management. While it may be easy to laugh at the Emu War, it holds important lessons about human-wildlife conflicts and ecological management. The Emu War is more than just a quirky anecdote from Australia's past. It's a stark illustration of the complexities and challenges inherent in managing human-wildlife interactions. The farmers' struggle against the emus highlights the delicate balance between agricultural development and preserving wildlife habitats. It also underscores the potential for conflict when human expansion encroaches upon the natural habitats of wildlife. Moreover, the Emu War serves as a case study in the limitations of military intervention in addressing ecological issues. The Australian government's decision to deploy military resources to deal with a wildlife problem was, in hindsight, a rather unconventional approach. Despite their firepower and tactics, the soldiers found themselves outmaneuvered by the emus, a stark reminder that traditional warfare strategies may not always be the best solution for ecological challenges. But perhaps the most profound lesson of the Emu War lies in its aftermath. The conflict ended inconclusively, with the emu population largely unaffected by the military intervention. However, the farmers continued to grapple with the emus' destructive impact on their crops. This highlights the unintended consequences of human actions on the environment, reminding us that our attempts to control nature often lead to unexpected outcomes. In essence, the Emu War serves as a microcosm of the broader issues surrounding human-wildlife conflicts. It reminds us of the importance of ecological balance, the limitations of forceful interventions, and the potential for unforeseen consequences when we interfere with nature. So, while the Emu War might be a source of amusement, it also provides us with valuable insights. It prompts us to question our approaches to wildlife management, to reevaluate our relationship with the natural world, and to consider the far-reaching effects of our actions on the environment. The Emu War, a unique chapter in history, serves as a reminder that our actions have impacts far beyond what we can immediately see.